Recording in progress.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Good evening. I'd like to call the City of Milton Planning Commission for February 28th, 2024 to order. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm Kurt Nolte. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan and plan map, and other related plans and amendments to the zoning ordinance. In attendance tonight, we have new Commissioner, Vic Jones, welcome.
Thank you.
Commissioner Trey James, Commissioner Judy Birds, Commissioner Fred Edwards. Absent this evening are Brian McNeese, and Samit Shah. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I'd like to acquaint everyone with some of the rules and procedures of conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some time for a rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is on the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided the time remains with the allotted time. I think, seeing that we really have nothing to hear, I don't think I really need to do much more. So I would like to, as we get started here, I would like to make a motion to move item 5A from our agenda, the old business, to review the bylaws of the City of Milton Planning Commission, to above the election of officers. So that'd be the very next thing we do.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. So at this point, we'd like to review and vote on the bylaws of the City of Milton Planning Commission. As everyone probably knows here, we've been working on these for the last couple of months to be sure that they're updated and in sync with some of the other committees. So anybody have any questions or comments on the updates that we received? I think we had them last month, so we're able to vote on them this month. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Nope.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the updated bylaws as presented in writing, effective immediately.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, second by Fred. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous also. So now we move on to the election of officers. We get to elect both the chairman and the vice chairman for the Planning Commission for 2024. I'd like to make a motion and I'd like to nominate Judy Birds for the chairperson position. I think Judy's experience and knowledge and attention to detail would be a great asset as the chairperson for this. Anybody second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Switch seats.
Yep, and do-si-do.
Thank you, Trey. Thank you, everybody. The next item on the agenda is the election of the vice chairperson. I'd like to nominate Kurt Nolte.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I think Kurt has served us very well in the preceding years, as well as experience before that, and I look forward to him continuing to serve and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of the Wednesday, January 31st, 2024 minutes.
I move that we accept the Wednesday, January 31st minutes
I'll
as
second.
presented.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. That moves us to new business, which is training on zoning procedures, and form-based code. Ms. Shuba.
Hey. Good evening, everyone.
Pipe down.
Like this, okay. Do you hear me? Good evening, planning commissioners. I'm Shuba Jangam, principal planner with the city. And we are kicking off this series of training sessions as you requested. Besides planning commissioners, we have some members from Design Review Board and Board of Zoning Appeal, and some of them are watching online. So everybody watching online, welcome to the Planning Commission. Today's topic is zoning and form-based code. Many of you have a good understanding and experience of the process, and some of you have just getting started. So we have put together this information that goes a little bit in the little bit back in the time. It might feel redundant, but please bear with us. Our goal here is to give you more context and prepare you for your role. And believe me, you're playing a very important role. You will be making recommendations to the city council. the Board of Zonings will be making decisions on variances and DRB demos and things like that. So your role is very influential. So, and I'm happy to see that you guys are taking it very seriously. So with that, we'll get started. As I said, it's about zoning, and zoning is more than 100 years old. New York City was the first one to have the zoning, but before they had zoning, they had a few other laws, and they were all related mostly to the tenements. And you know probably a little bit about the history back then, the population, how they were living in the tenements and stuff like that. So as you can see on the graphics, pre-zoning era, the people were building these tenements literally lot line to lot line. So New York City kind of started requiring light shafts and windows, and slowly made improvements so that the living condition of this tenement will improve. And by 1916, the city of New York had an actual zoning plan, zoning map. So the zoning map also had some setbacks, as the picture below on the slide is showing. They had some setbacks and some height requirements. So there was a really a preliminary kind of arrangement there, but they had a zoning map back then. And as you know, the population of cities were growing back then, and the census 1920 recorded that more than half of the United States population at that time lived in urban areas. So as you can feel it, that they were trying to control the growth, and they were trying ways to make the living better. The Cincinnati was the first city to actually have a comprehensive plan in 1925. Well, it was all going well until a zoning challenge came by. And it was 1926, and it was a challenge between Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty. So Village of Euclid is a small suburb in Ohio, outside Cleveland, and they had a zoning set up. And Ambler Realty held 68 acres land, and they wanted to use it for industrial development, and the Village of Euclid said no. So they challenged this decision, and this court case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And at the Supreme Court, the Village of Euclid lost, but zoning was upheld as constitutional. So since then, zoning became legal, as long as the Supreme Court said this police power of local government will be upheld as long as there is some connection to the public welfare. So since then, this kind of typical single-use zoning became known as Euclidean zoning. Okay, so now let's go back to our local zoning history. I know Georgia's home rule allows local jurisdictions to have zoning as a police power. Fulton County was created in 1853, and after the Depression of 1928, the couple of other counties were added to Fulton County, and that's how it is right now. But it was 1946 when Fulton adopted its zoning map. And they might have changed a little bit, but when Milton became city in 2006, it adopted Fulton's zoning code as is, and then slowly changed it. So, that's the little history of our zoning. And now, obviously, we're going to adopt UDC this year. So it's going to look a little different, but it's the same kind of zone code. Okay, so just to give you a gist of what's a zoning ordinance, it has these kind of components. They have set of zoning districts, zoning categories, and the land and the types of land uses allowed in those zoning districts, and it may have development standards like building minimum size of building or maximum size of building, setbacks requirements or buffers, and it's always have a map associated with it. And the map shows zoning for each parcel in the whole city. So map that you're seeing over here is Milton zoning map, and the pale yellow color area is all zoned the same zoning district, that is AG1. So as you can see, most of our Milton area is zoned AG1, and there's very limited other types of zone. Now you can see more colorful areas over here near Crabapple and Deerfield area. I'm going to talk about it a little more in the presentation. So is this zoning locked in 100% forever? No. There is always a way out. And if a property owner wants a relief from couple of standards, zoning standards, he can ask for a variance. That's one of the mechanism. If he wants to change the use, he can petition for rezoning. That's another way to make change. Another mechanism City of Milton has is called use permit, where we actually allow certain uses with a process of use permit. This is more of allows more public hearing and more eyes on the whole new use and how there could be some conditions placed in it. The community neighbor gets to get involved into and saying that is this suitable use or not, and things like that. So that's one of the process that lets people change their zoning or uses in the zoning map. So as I said, this is where our boards come in a picture, because they help government make the decisions during these public processes, right? So like, for example, Planning Commission, their role is as an advisory board, and they advise a bit on the decision making of land use. And the Board of Zoning Appeal, their role is to grant or deny the relief in variances. And the Design Review Board is another board that actually they focus on aesthetics and reviews of demolitions. Then we don't currently have historic preservation commission, but we have had that in the past. Their role would, if we had, their role would be focused mostly on a historic preservation. And finally, the most important board, or I shouldn't call it board, but the mayor and council, they get to make a final decision on all the zoning matters, really. So all the boards except mayor and council, they are made of selected, they're all made of members who are selected by mayor and city council, and they're not elected. And they are desired to be comprised of people from representing different areas of the city and different geographic and different occupation. And so that's what's desired. And they really help us do the public process in the city. Okay, so in addition to base zoning like AG1, C1, whatever industrial zoning, we have something that's called overlay zoning. And overlay zoning is an additional layer of regulations or standards that can apply to certain geographic area. So here you can see we have three different overlay zones at the Birmingham Road and Birmingham Highway crossing. We have a Birmingham Crossroad overlay. Rural Milton overlay is all the green area that you are seeing, and the blue area is State Route 9 overlay. So we have few more standards, and when that happens is when somebody comes in for a development, they have to look at the base zoning as well as overlay zoning, and they have to apply both standards from both the zoning. And in addition to this overlay zoning, we have something called Milton's rural viewshed, where we have require 60 feet on both sides of a major roads on Milton to comply with certain architectural standards. So that's also there. Okay, any questions on the zoning or overlay zoning? No? Okay, great. So I just have some examples from our neighbors. This is Alpharetta zoning map. As you can see, they have very few AG zoning over here. They have lots of R1, R5, R15, plenty of other different types of zonings. And this is Johns Creek zoning map, which looks totally different than both of Alpharetta and Milton. So they have different types of zoning. And here the buffer that you're seeing, I think this is a buffer around the Chattahoochee River. So, so everybody has created their own set of regulations with this tool called zoning. It's it's a tool to control the land use. Okay. And as you can see, they all actually got their basic zoning from Fulton County, but then again, so much diversity you can see that, they created. Okay, so moving to the next level, remember I'm sure you noticed those colorful areas. Those are our form-based code areas. This is a completely different system than typical zoning, okay? And before we dive into what's in there, I want to take you back again to the past. So since zoning became prevalent and a lot happened in late 20th century and maybe a little variation at different locality, but overall nationwide, there was a typical pattern of land use was emerging, and that was that the cities were physically expanding and the suburbs were growing. They were surrounded by suburbs around the cities. So these suburbs were actually transforming America's countryside and turning this agricultural land into housing. As you can see picture on the left, this is what was happening everywhere pretty much. And this phenomenon is well known as sprawl. You have heard of it, I'm sure. Now, I'm not going to count all the side effects of suburbia or sprawl, but what happened, it was obvious then people began to rethink zoning. Is this the right product we want to have? So they realized that instead of single uses, maybe the mixing of some uses is useful. You want to have some bakery shop nearby. You want to have a coffee shop nearby. So some uses, having them close to residential area is actually having a better, making places more livable, right? So this idea, different ideas came by, and this is one of the ideas that came out of years of dissatisfaction with zoning, was mimicking the natural ecology, where there's a slow progression between the rural and urban core. Now, the picture on the right is actually talking about it. There's these transects, the T1 natural zone, T2 rural zone, T3 suburban zone, T4 general urban. This is a natural progression towards higher density. So this was an idea that was put forward by some ecologists. And then another idea that came along was from a new urbanism movement. So this movement, there was a group of planners, thinkers, or architects that they advocated some ideas that makes the place more livable. And they came up with these ideas that placemaking or form-based code. And they actually really promoted development that is reminiscent of old neighborhood. So as you can see in this picture, lots of buildings and roads, and the whole structure of the neighborhood is really compact and well designed, and it feels more walkable and bikeable. And when you have such an enclosure, right, you feel safe to walk around and go anywhere, and you don't feel alienated on the road. So that's what they advocated. They really advocated for connectivity, mixed housing, mixed uses, very traditional neighborhood, like old fashioned. So why am I talking about this? Because we actually used these concepts here in Milton, specifically in Crabapple District. Okay, so as just to tell you the difference between the Euclidean zoning and a form-based code. The Euclidean zoning, the traditional zoning that we learned earlier, they use the single use. They have buffers between the residential and commercial. They require lots of parking. Whereas the form-based code, really, they focus on the form, mixed use, civic spaces, landscaping, architecture. So Milton wanted to set up historic Crabapple area as Milton's downtown. Okay. So the traditional zoning was not efficient, really. So traditional zoning, or it only focuses on what's inside the building, what's the use of the building, whereas a form-based code focuses on the form of the building, the architecture, and how it's placed related to roads, and how it creates the public spaces. So by adopting form-based code in Crabapple and Deerfield area, city began to require certain architectural style. And this is the reason the Crabapple looks like the way it looks now. So form-based code has really created a different environment than a traditional zoning. So in 2012 is when Crabapple form-based code was adopted by Milton, and followed by Deerfield's form-based code in 2013 and 2014. Basically, the intent of the form-based code in Crabapple is to obviously promote high-quality mixed-use development, create walkable, bikeable, friendly environment. It has transit zones, T2 to T5, and we have kind of we have some regulations related to density, building placement, form, what kind of functions. There is a chart in Muni Code that shows what can go in T2, what can go in T4. And it can be a mix of retail and residential, So we have some parking standards, landscaping standards, lighting standards, architectural standards, civic space requirement, public frontage requirements, and private frontage requirements. All this is spelled out in our Muni Code for Crabapple form-based code. This is the map of that's showing actually all the transit zone in Crabapple. And as you can see, at the cross section of Birmingham Road and Crabapple, this is the historic place. This is where we have T5, which actually allowed us to have this beautiful historic buildings and close to the road, and that it creates that environment that makes us really unique, right? And then as you go further from this, there is T3, T2, and things like that. So that's the Crabapple map. And these are the 7 architectural styles that are actually spelled out in the code. We allow them in Crabapple. This is why we see more consistent architectural style and the buildings over here, okay? This is a map of Deerfield. Now, Deerfield is completely different character area. It has lots of commercial. So it's not historic either. So, it's set up a little different. You can see more T6 over here. The T6 is the highest density. T6 allows 12 units per acre, okay? And they can even get more with the TDR, but T6 is by rights 12 units per acre. And we have really set this area up for higher density. We have the similar set of standards for this except that we have more T6 and T5 in this area, which allows really great density. This is our commercial district. We want to have more commercial over there, more mixed use over here. But we have zoned it T6 doesn't mean it's actually right now using T6. You see the top two are the typical layouts that we see in Deerfield. They are not using their full density yet. But we would like to fill in and make the best use of infrastructure that is there, and we can turn them into the pictures that look like bottom, just a little bit more filled in, more better architecture, better development, better spaces. So this is called infill development, and we would like to have it in Deerfield area, but we haven't had it much, but we're trying to promote that one. Now I'm going to hand it over to Emily to explain a little more details about our zones, and then she's also going to talk about the procedures. Thank you.
Yeah, like Shubha said, we're just going to go through the transect zone so y'all can see like a picture of what you might see or expect in that zoning, and then also some of the uses and building that you would see. So T2 is the rural zone. As you can see on the slide, you're going to see more rural uses like barns and fields, more natural environment. And this is supposed to be like the furthest out from our village core in our zoning. So when you were looking at those maps of the Deerfield Form-Based Code and the Crabapple Form-Based Code, these are the ones on the fringes. And as you start coming in, you're going to start seeing T3, more suburban zoning. This is going to be low density residential. There's going to be, shared lawn spaces like you see on this right-hand picture. Some bike lanes might start showing up, and, rear lanes and that kind of stuff as you start moving inward. When you get into T4, this is going to be your general urban. This is when you're going to see medium density residential. So some commercial might start showing up. You're going to see outbuildings and side yards, and the houses are going to start getting a little bit closer together, but they're still going to have some of these porches and great architectural features that you're seeing here. When you go into T5, this is when you're really going to see still medium intensity residential, but the commercial is going to start popping up a little bit more. As you probably recognize these buildings across the street, this is where you're going to see more shop fronts, galleries. This is, as you're walking down the street, this is what's going to give you more of that village feel. And this is kind of our urban center zone. This is the main street. This is what traditional zoning kind of misses. And then T6, like Shubha mentioned, is kind of going to be our high intensity residential and commercial. This is retail. This is office buildings. This is kind of a lot more what you might see over on the Deerfield side of the zoning code. But at the same time, there's room for residential and other great architectural features that the form-based code provides. The last thing we wanted to touch on tonight is the zoning procedures law, which is what we do before the case comes to you guys and what we do before it comes to council from our perspective and y'all's. And you guys actually saw this as a text amendment kind of recently because this changed in August, Paul? July?
It went into effect on the 1st of July.
Yeah.
It changed the year before.
So this is just the process that requires us to assure that due process is being provided during these zoning cases. It applies to zoning ordinances, which you guys are familiar with, text amendments, rezonings, use permits. That's the most of the stuff that you guys would see. This is a visual timeline of just the kind of stuff that we do. So we send out subject property owner letters and neighboring property owner letters. We post a notice of the CZIM in the newspaper. We post a sign at the subject site, and then we go over and post in the newspaper again for the Planning Commission and City Council meeting. All notices must state the time, place, and purpose of the hearing. That's very traditional to make sure that the public is informed. And then this is the part of the flow chart that was put in the text amendment that came before you guys last year. Just to kind of show the process of what a rezoning would look like before it comes to you guys. Right here in the middle, and then also where it goes after you guys hear a rezoning case. So I know we just had one of those kind of recently. But that brings us to the end. Me and Shuba can take questions. Paul could probably answer any questions if you have anything. And
To start out with, thank you so much, Emily and Shuba. That was an excellent presentation. I really appreciate it. I almost wish we could somehow get that on the city website so others
Yeah.
could see it.
it's on YouTube right now.
Right. What questions does everybody have?
But the one I was going to have was to make sure that this was available.
Yep.
And it is, you say now on,
Being
is?
recorded right now. Yep.
because I mean, it helps us, but it also helps you to be able to identify to the public exactly where to go
Right.
to find what those mean.
Yep. So we'll keep note of that moving forward.
Very good.
I've had a number of neighbors on Doris Road ask if we were getting a sidewalk put in, and I think it's because there's just road work being done.
Yeah.
That's T2, is that right? It's urban?
AG1.
I think it's AG1.
Oh, AG1.
Yeah.
So there'll never be sidewalks on AG1, or is that?
No,
Could it be?
Never, but this really sidewalks we require sidewalks from the developer only when they are quarter mile from the park, public park. But if it's in the project of our public works department, that they might get a sidewalk. I don't know exactly what's happening.
Okay.
What parcels we are talking about.
but it is available on AG1.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you
Right.
can have a sidewalk.
Public Works has a schedule of
So
Like
it should,
Trails and sidewalks. Yes.
Should
If I
be
can find that
available.
schedule.
should
Yeah.
be available.
Okay, cool.
I just had a question too. I mean, last year we worked on the urban growth boundary.
Mhm.
How does that pertain to this?
We definitely, as you remember, I looked at, I actually calculated density in Deerfield to make sure that we had enough space so we can actually put the urban growth boundary around Crabapple and Deerfield area so that that doesn't preclude us from any kind of, doesn't choke us for in taxation front, okay? Lucky for us, the way it's set up right now, our zoning, lots of it is AG1, which is rural, natural, and we have set up 2 different districts in the city for high density. We have set them up for high density. So it was very natural. There was an invisible boundary already around this rural, between the rural area and the urban area. So it was not difficult to put that urban growth boundary. What the urban growth boundary did for us is it actually created another layer of protection for rural areas because council really wanted to protect rural areas from any kind of urban growth. But to be honest, we have plenty of space to make best use of our infrastructure, utilities, and everything that's already there in Crabapple and Deerfield.
Thanks.
Very good.
I have a question along those lines. Early in the presentation, you mentioned the Milton Rural View Shed.
Yeah,
So what kind of requirements come with that?
the only requirement right now under rural Milton View Shed is that it requires all the structures that go in the rural view shed requires architectural review when they come for a permit. Other than that, there are some other minor requirements like the septic tank cannot go in the rural view shed area, or the natural vegetation has to be maintained, and you can't just cut the trees and landscape it like an urban area. It has to be maintained as a rural vegetation, rural view shed, and all the trees that were naturally existing there.
And that's for all public roads or just like an AG1?
No, public roads, all public
okay.
roads. Not in the subdivision, just the main roads, the major.
Right,
roads.
okay.
Any other questions on the presentation? I do have one question, Emily. What's on the docket for March? In general, do we have any?
As of right
Plats?
now, nothing. We potentially might have a preliminary plat. We just need to figure out if they're going to meet all the deadlines, but
Great.
I'm sure we'll have something. And if not, we might add another training session like this one. We have a big list of things we'd love to get through this year.
I know you have given us something. Is there something that you want us to expand on?
Yes, because I know when we did the review of the UDC, we had identified some areas, so it would be good to get those on the docket at some point as schedule permits, as well as, I think we're trying every other month to do the updates on the
Correct.
strategic plan and the comprehensive plan, so.
So that will be on there next month. And then also it will be the quarterly tree waiver update. Sandra will come back. I don't believe we've had any, but she'll be back to say that we didn't have any.
Anything else? Trey?
You want me to motion to adjourn? I would motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all. Thank you all.